The mediator is Dr. Melody Heaps. She's from the justice system, and she's the president of Global ISA. We also have Dr. Igor Koutsenok. He is a psychiatry teacher, and he's the international director on Dixon Technology and other programs. We will also have Michele Worobiec, who is the president of the National Alliance of the Mother Step Drug Laws. She has more than 20 years of experience in judicial policies and strategies based on evidence. And we will also have Elisa Rubinis. She is a consultant of the Unit of Institutional Strengthening of the Executive Secretariat of the Inter-American Commission for Drug Abuse of the OEA. The panel is going to be in English. We offer simultaneous interpretation, and I think that we are ready to start.
Thank you very much. I want to say good afternoon to my friends in Brazil. As the chair of ISIP, I am really rather thrilled that you asked me to be a part of this. I am amazed at the degree to which the leadership of ISIP and Paolo Martelli, as well as the private and international organizations, have come together to create such a terrific conference. Apparently 1,200 people are registered, and I'm extremely excited and very grateful for the energy and passion that the ISIP chapter has really set as a tone for ISIP chapters internationally. I think it's really important that I do recognize the work of Claremont University, of CCAD, part of OAS, and the African Union in helping put this together. And I realize that that partnership has been an ongoing partnership, and I'm very, very, very grateful for that. I am welcoming the ISIP Brazil members, and those of you that are not, I encourage you to get online and join ISIP. I understand that on Saturday there will be a global ISIP presentation, so please stay tuned for that. It's very interesting because when I was asked to speak at this conference, I thought I was speaking as board president to say hello and greeting. And they said, no, we want you to talk about alternatives to incarceration. But I said, I don't understand. The focus of the conference is evidence-based prevention services. And the person just looked at me and I said, oh, I get it. You're right, alternatives to incarceration is in fact a methodology for preventing crime, for intervening in the cycle of addiction, relapse, criminality, incarceration, addiction, etc. So I do understand it and am very, very grateful that you are interested in this subject. It has been the passion of my life. I have been the former president of an organization in the United States called Treatment Alternatives for Safe Communities that has developed alternatives at every point of the justice spectrum. I am also now consulting with the State Department's International Narcotics and Law Enforcement to help develop ATI internationally. And wonderfully so, the people on this call have been a part of that initiative as well. And let me introduce them in the order that they will be speaking, starting out with Dr. Igor Koutsenok, who is a professor of psychiatry at the University of Southern California in San Diego. He is also the director of the Center for Criminality and Addiction Research, and is a director of ITTC, which is the International Addiction Technology and Transfer Center. I'm looking forward to your hearing him. The second person is Michele Worobiec. At one point, Michele served as vice president of the organization that I was the head of, although not under my leadership. She is now the president of the National Association for Model State Drug Laws. She has been a magistrate and a judge and was policy counsel for the State of Ohio Supreme Court. And finally, we have Elisa Rubinis, who I regard as my partner in this global ATI development. She is a consultant to the Institutional Strengthening Unit at the Executive Secretariat of the International American Drug Abuse Commission and of Organization of the American States, CCAD. She has been the main author and developer of the case care management curricula, which is the curricula that talks about what needs to be done in the treatment of people with criminal justice who are in substance use disorders in contact with the justice system. And she's been my partner in developing the ATI-INL initiative. So with that, let me begin by talking about why are we really saying this, if it is at all related to prevention. Again, I go back to the fact that people with substance use disorders are so often involved in criminal justice activities, either because they are arrested for drug possession, drug crimes, property crimes, or other crimes related to the need to maintain their addiction. In doing so, it is a constant cycle of addiction, arrest, potentially incarceration, and back to addiction. One of the ways I like to show that is to talk about what I think is a look at the subway map. Can you all see this now? Somebody say yes to me. Hello?
No.
No, we don't see
No.
Melody.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Can we try it again?
Yes.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
You can see it. Okay, I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to touch it. I was going to make it larger, but I'm going to leave it as it is. Okay, you can see it. Shake your head. Okay, good. What you see here is what I like to call, as a person who has lived in two big cities, New York and Chicago, a subway map or a metro map. Those of you who may live in places that don't have that, it could be a bus map, a map, or a train map. The idea being that you enter at the very beginning, and in the case of most of our systems, you pass through an express train that goes from the immediate contact with law enforcement all the way through usually to prison or parole, or if you're lucky, if you're just lucky, you might be able to get a trial and they may put you into a community sentencing probation status, wherein you will then probably go back to the community and re-up your drug use, et cetera, because nothing has been done to intervene in that. And so it becomes, again, this cycle of arrest, incarceration, arrest, probation, community, back to arrest. And the more arrests there are, of course, the greater your criminal justice profile, and chances are you'll be ending up in prison. And what we want to do is say, wait a minute, there are places along the line that can be exit points. And it's important that we talk about a system of exit points as early as possible, so that individuals might be able to integrate treatment with regard to their justice system process. In other words, you're marrying public health and justice. You are offering treatment interventions at the arrest level, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, when the charges are filed, or at the prosecutorial level, when there has to be an arraignment or a trial, of course, and we know about drug courts, but this is beyond drug courts. 2 or 3 drug courts are not a system. So we're talking about points in the justice system that comport with what your country's justice system looks like, wherein you can set up treatment interventions that move all the way through the system, so that when people are in fact released to the community, they are sent to treatment. It is not a free pass, and I think that's important to understand. There are issues of compliance that are required by the justice system, mostly that they participate in treatment and comply with the treatment plans, and there is reporting back to the justice system. But in doing so, we interrupt that cycle, that never-ending cycle, and in doing so, we begin to relieve the system of the need to build more prisons, to spend more money in investing in justice system as opposed to public health. We begin to say to people, there is a recovery mechanism. It enables communities to see safety, more safety. It allows families to become more organized and together. It provides the recovery of individuals in the justice system and keeps them out of any further justice involvement. And that is an important factor in terms of preventing future criminal activity. It obviously is important with regard to community safety. And as I said, it is very important with regard to how we spend our public dollars, whether we not need to build more prison cells, or in fact, whether we need to really invest in the community, in treatment, and in the healing of individuals with substance use disorders. And I guess the question is, well, so what? Why? Does it really make a difference? And what I'd like to do is turn it over to Dr. Koutsenok. Dr. Koutsenok, why bother? Is there a reason we want to do this? Am I talking a fantasy here?
No, you're not talking a fantasy. First, good morning to everybody, and thank you for inviting me. I presume, I really don't know the participants. I know there are many, but I don't know who are these people. And my assumption is that some of you are managers, decision makers, people who are responsible for public funding or private funding. As a way of getting started, I would like to tell you that the cost effectiveness and cost benefit analysis, multiple, there's more than one study, actually show that for every dollar invested in treatment interventions as an alternative to prisons, you can actually save between 4.5 to 6, different studies show different numbers, but the range is between $4.5 and $6 in return. You know what, even, let me tell you, even the greediest Wall Street banks would love this as a return to investment. So you are not just contributing to public safety, which is a major issue. In the long run, you can actually save some money because right now we're paying an enormous amount of money for incarcerating people all over the world. Prisons cost a lot of money. And also, we will be able to save the money on less criminal justice proceedings, less use of public funds and social services, and many other things. So for those of you who are not clinicians, but rather administrators, this is a consideration that if I was you, I would be quite interested in exploring. But let me show you a couple of data, and if I'm running over time, you will let me know. So here is the reality, and the reality is not pretty. We have a significant population of people, actually all over the world, including in the United States, people who have a substance use disorder with various severity, and they are under some type of criminal justice supervision, including in prisons. And actually, the prevalence of substance use disorders in justice-involved clients is at average 4 times more than in the general population. So in other words, a different way to present the same data just to support the point we are making. The more severe is the substance use disorder, the more likely for this person to get under criminal justice attention, including to get imprisoned. So there is a direct relationship between the severity of the problem, which is a diagnosable condition, and treatable condition, and the chances for the person to end up in prison or under some type of criminal justice supervision. The truth is, though, every criminal justice organization in the world, particularly prisons, but not limited to prisons, every criminal justice sanction has incapacitating effect on people, which in fact, if you think about it from the public safety perspective, it makes sense. Because we need criminal justice structures, organizations, and we need prisons to really incapacitate people whose behavior was unmanageable otherwise. They have committed criminal activities, they have committed crimes, sometimes very serious crimes. The society is no longer willing to tolerate it, so we incapacitate them by putting them in prisons or using other forms of supervision or criminal justice sanction. From the public safety perspective, in a way, it does make sense. The problem here is, first, we are talking about a population of people with a diagnosable mental health condition, which is substance use disorder. And incapacitation is just the opposite to what we want to see in a good quality addiction treatment. We want to reinforce the person, we want to empower the person, we want to rebuild some of the social skills. And criminal justice organizations have never been designed to do that. They've been designed exactly to control, coerce, and incapacitate the behavior that must have been incapacitated. All right. So in a way, if you think about it from the even logical perspective and common sense perspective, we're talking about an interaction between two systems that have pretty opposite goals, because the goal of addiction treatment is just the opposite to incapacitation. What we also know, there is no single study, not even one, that would suggest a sustainable, positive behavioral change as a result of punishment, threat of punishment, or criminal justice pressure alone. With criminal justice pressure, you can get compliance. You can suppress a behavior that you want to suppress. And sometimes it's necessary, particularly if you talk about serious crime, you really, as a society, really want to suppress it. And our colleagues from the criminal justice world, in general, they're doing pretty effective work, suppressing a dangerous and problematic behavior. The problem here is the suppression lasts only as long as you have control over the person, with very predictable rebound back to the previous behavior as soon as your control fades. This is the problem number one. But there's a problem number two. If we utilize criminal justice sanctions only, including imprisonment, some of the people under criminal justice supervision with substance use disorders will actually get worse. And the data is very, very compelling here. By becoming worse, what I mean is they will become more likely to commit another crime, and they will become more likely to relapse with drugs and alcohol. And I'm particularly referring to people younger than 25. So if the only thing we do is criminal justice pressure, including prisons, we are not just not getting the result that we are looking for, meaning public safety protection and public health protection. We are at risk to make some of the subpopulations worse, which is a big problem. In other words, when we are considering therapeutic interventions for justice-involved clients, please pay attention to the language. I'm not talking about offenders, defenders, criminals, none of the language that is typical in criminal justice environment. I'm talking about a little bit more neutral and less stigmatizing terminology of justice-involved clients. These are people who are stigmatized enough. We don't have to stigmatize them even more. So let's pay attention to our language, but this is a side point. So when we are planning to do something as an alternative to incarceration, any activity that will improve the public safety and will decrease the rates of drug and alcohol relapses, we need to make sure what is the goal. The goal is not just the symptom reduction. The goal, although it's a wonderful goal to reduce the symptom, meaning get people into drug and alcohol recovery. An equally important goal here is to make sure that as a result of our intervention, this person will be less likely to commit another crime, meaning we are protecting public safety as much as we are improving the public health and we are improving the client's outcomes. So what does work and how to make it work if you really want to do it? Don't worry, I'm not going to read all of the slides. You can read it yourself. I just want to make sure that we have enough data. So every time we are making statements or presenting something, definitely some of the statements we do not have enough data, or we don't have good data, or they have never been studied. So in that case, I can tell you, this is what I think. This is what it looks like to me. In that case, I will have a pleasure of sharing with you my opinion, but I would not recommend you to use my opinion to make important decisions, particularly at the level of the whole country. This is just one person's opinion. I'm talking about the situation when we do have enough data generated by the good quality science. And the good quality science in the last 25, 30 years is actually quite clear. What do we need to have in place if you really want to make it work, and if you really want to create a system of care that is different from the traditional lock them up, throw away the key approach that clearly is not terribly effective all over the world, and we know that. There are some system issues. We need to rebuild the system, or we need to think about the changes or adjustments to the system, criminal justice system and therapeutic system, like using the standardized risk assessment, standardized needs assessment, using treatment matching strategy, offering people more than one treatment model, because if you're running a shoe business and in your shoe store you're selling just one model and one size, I can guarantee you that the next morning you're not going to have a single customer there. Well, that's pretty much the same approach here. So we need to, every patient, every client, every justice-involved person responds differently to different type of treatment interventions. So we have to have a menu of options, a menu of treatment strategies and programs capable to address the unique needs of justice-involved clients. We also need to integrate the systems as much as possible: social services, criminal justice services, therapeutic addiction medicine, addiction treatment services, mental health services, family support services, because guess what? The operation is so complex that even if you are genius, and most of you being here in this conference, except me, you are genius, but even being genius is not going to help you much simply because of the complexity of the operation. You really need to have a good friend, just a court judge. You really need to have a social worker. You need to have a mental health professional. You need to have a housing specialist. You need to have an addiction counselor, because it's not because we are dumb or we are not trained or we don't have skills. No, because the operation is very complex. We need to address a number of clinical issues that are not directly related to the criminal justice system, but all of these interventions they do unfold in the criminal justice context. No matter what kind of treatment model we use, we need to use the models with proven and good quality evidence of effectiveness. So if you're planning to do a Gestalt therapy and psychoanalytical, psychodynamic leather couch type of intervention, this is probably a good model for somebody else, but the data shows that these type of models are not effective for the population we are referring to. The good news, though, we have a number of interventions with very good evidence of effectiveness. Well, let's focus on that. Regardless what type of intervention you decided to use, there must be enough dose of treatment. Because even if you selected the best aspirin in the world and you have a severe headache, and you decided instead of 351 milligrams to take 10 milligrams because you don't have more budget for that, your headache is not going to go away. Why? Because you're using a subtherapeutic dose. The 381 milligram of aspirin is the data-driven result. This is the result of lots of science, and we know this is the minimum dose of aspirin that might help you in addressing your problem. If you use less of that, you're wasting your time, you will be suffering from your headache, and you're making the whole picture worse. So when we talk about the treatment, there must be enough dose of treatment, meaning the length and the intensity. The length is not the only indicator. The intent, what is happening. If you want to do a treatment and you can afford only 25 days of treatment, don't bother, it's not gonna work because this is a subtherapeutic dose. The minimum length of treatment, hundreds of studies show the same thing, should be 90 days or more, preferably more. We also need to consider the continuum of care because people over time, this is a treatable condition. We are talking about substance use disorders. They are treatable conditions, but these are chronic conditions. People do not recover over time. If, God forbid, you get appendicitis, you will get a surgery. I can almost guarantee you that next morning you will feel better. And I can absolutely guarantee that this will never happen again. But this is a different type of problem. This is the problem that people get in recovery slowly. It happens, it takes time. It happens in stages with incremental increase in the amount of improvements, but it still takes time. So we need to consider the possibilities for continuation of care, for continuum of care. I don't like particularly the expression aftercare because this should be the same treatment episode in different environment. But the continuum of care is critically important, and I will show you a couple of data. Also, we need to consider the fact that even though we are talking about people who have two major sets of problems, some type of criminal behavior and some level of severity of substance use disorder, in fact, these people have 10,000s of other problems: HIV, TB, hepatitis C, homelessness, financial illiteracy, unemployment, and all emotional trauma in the past, all sorts of things. So this is not just treating criminogenic thinking errors or the severe opioid use disorder because the person is shooting heroin. It's much more than that. So we need to consider all of this, a variety of different problems that need to be addressed. But first, they must be uncovered through careful assessment. One of the important things in my mind, whatever you decide to do, treatment decisions, well, folks, please pay attention. If there is anything smart that I said, this is probably will be the only one. Treatment decisions should not be based on the type of offense the person has committed. Whether it is drug-related offense or violent or non-violent offense, in many instances, this is just irrelevant. Treatment decisions should be based on the individual assessment findings. Because the truth is, in many instances, the difference between violent versus non-violent offense is 2 minutes. The police officer responded quickly enough, that's it. So now from the legal perspective, this will be considered a non-violent offense. On this slide, you have a number of treatment interventions that have very solid evidence of effectiveness. The solid evidence are coming from good quality science, not the crap from the internet, but the publications in journals, peer-reviewed journals, carefully replicated in multiple cultures, in multiple environments, and showing the same results. So these are the interventions that we have very good evidence of effectiveness. And one of the important things is the most effective treatment is behavioral in nature. It means we are not just talking about the concept. While people under our care, they have a chance to practice new behaviors, to practice relapse prevention strategies, drug refusal strategies, decision-making strategies, impulse control strategies, and multiple other things. So this is not just talking about something. This is not just about giving buprenorphine or methadone. This is about the opportunity for people to practice new behaviors that will help them in the life after the criminal justice supervision and when they're out of this particular treatment setting. And the data about it is very, very appealing for many, many years. We also have plenty of data suggesting that people, even in community corrections, the probation type of work, or drug or reentry type of work, people who are involved in treatment milieu and they're involved in some of the therapeutic interventions that are appropriately matched to the needs, actually doing significantly better in terms of drug use, in terms of illegal activities, employment, and the quality of life in general as measured by suicidal indicators. So one of the, the quality of life is pretty broad concept, how to measure that. Well, one of the ways to do it is to ask people and to measure mathematically how suicidal do they feel. Well, people do really better on every domain that I just referred to. Pretty much the same findings we found from even more disturbed, life-disturbed population that requires long-term residential treatment. I mean, the level of dysfunction is so great, so terrible, that these people really need a period of time, usually several months, to be in protected residential environment with some treatment going on. That will give them a chance to actually get on their feet and rebuild a life and start over again. In long-term residential treatment, and we know that these are clients who are probably have the most dysfunctional lifestyles and most severe problems across every domain. Even this population is doing quite better if they're offered treatment. And again, I'm talking about people under criminal justice supervision. This is another slide in support of the statement that I made about the importance of the continuing care. The data is from Texas. And it's from Texas simply because they've run the largest study in the United States in 2019. And the data from smaller studies, they show pretty much the same thing. Even if you run the best treatment intervention in one setting under criminal justice supervision, and you just send people back home straight without any support, any transitional care, this is a bad idea. Because people who did have this continuum of care and support component, actually they did significantly better compared to everybody else. And this is another evidence for that coming from a very large study, one of the largest Key and Crest study in New York and in Delaware, suggesting pretty much the same thing. The continuing care completers, they do significantly better than anyone else. So, yes. Yeah.
We need to wrap it up as soon as we can.
Yeah. I'm practically done. This is the best slide of all. I just presented you a couple of pieces of data, and definitely this is a very small fraction of the amount of science that we have so far. The last thing I want to say, no matter what you decide to do, no matter whether you trust me or you don't, you better educate yourself. The important thing is, before making any decision of any level of importance, take a deep breath and look at the literature, look at the science. And if you have difficulty finding the science, we are here. We can help you in finding and making a difference between bad quality science and good quality science that you will hopefully you will use in your decision making. Good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Igor, very, very much. Our next speaker is Michele Worobiec, and you remember my subway map. And I talked about setting up no exit strategies where people can obtain treatment at new exits. I wanted Michele to talk to you as a former judge about the justice system's look at that. But in particular, the newest and latest initiative, which is coming on board, is people who are in fact called by the police, who may not even have a charge, and the police can engage in what is known as deflection. It's kind of like if the person with a substance use disorder is about to buy a ticket to that one-way express train, the police can come in and say, hey, I have another idea for you. Let me show you where I think you may want to go. So Michele, I'd like you to talk to us from a justice perspective.
Thank you, Melody. Let me set this up to share my presentation. And Igor, I'm going to have to borrow your the end slide. I like that as being the favorite slide. So we don't need to spend much time on this first slide at all. But what I want us to start thinking about, what really is the purpose of a court? And if you listen to Igor, he gave you some of the answer. My hint is that it's not punishment. And so sometimes people get caught up in the thought that when behavior is brought into the court, we know maximum fines and penalties, we determine if that behavior happened, we punish it, and we think the court or the justice system's role is done. And actually, what you just heard is that can oftentimes make people worse. So I'm going to remind you that the goal of the justice system is actually to reduce the behaviors or eliminate, to the extent possible, the behaviors that are bringing people into the justice system. So the thinking was, if we punish someone, in my own training as a lawyer and a judge, was if we punish someone enough, they'll understand that what they did was wrong. And if it is really enough, they'll never want to do this again because they want to avoid that future additional punishment. And that it doesn't work for all the reasons that we've already heard. So what does work? It's not one size fits all. And so I want to review with you some of the systems components that need to be in place when we put together a more effective system so that we reduce the behavior and in turn create, safer communities and healthier communities. So you saw the subway map already. This has some stars, so it even gives you more details about when these interventions can take place. I'm going to simplify it a little bit by showing you that there is a continuum of the justice system that I'm going to call pre-arrest. And I have another slide to dive more deeply into this because it's a new concept and I want to make sure you understand it. But we have an opportunity before someone is even arrested to simply maintain them in the community and give them all those good supports and everything they need to address the behavior that otherwise could be brought into the justice system as part of a criminal proceeding. Sometimes this may be necessary. If someone is brought into the justice system, you see a few more stars along the way, where we can look at a quick exit where it's appropriate. And then finally, we have post-sentencing. So if there is a conviction, not just for possession or sale of substances, but all those behaviors that are associated with the use of addictive substances, there are opportunities even there to minimize or eliminate incarceration as a response. And I would suggest to you that it's not one approach that works for everyone. We do need complementary approaches that take into account this whole continuum, including reentry back into the community. As Melody suggested, we wanted to take a particular look at deflection. So I have some movement on this slide that I borrowed from one of my colleagues. Deflection is really the earliest, most upstream approach, and it's based upon providing community-based services. We're not going to enter into the justice system. Instead, we're going to do that wrapping around completely within the community, and it's voluntary. It happens here, so it's typically initiated through police and other first responders. We want to make sure that someone can safely be deflected away from the justice system and into the community, so we never want to lose sight of safety. And we understand that at times police or first responders will do this. Rather than arrest, they may use their discretion to say, I'm not going to take action right now. Right? Sometimes that looks like a reminder that it would be a really good idea for you to take care of your substance use disorder or take care of these mental health issues, but it wasn't an active connection and engagement in services. And so here in deflection, it's showing you how you can actively help that person connect to what's needed. Of course, we still had what I talked about, the pre-adjudication, the post-adjudication opportunities. They are collectively referred to as diversion. And again, the distinction here is that when we are not going into the court system, that is where we have a lot of movement on this, deflection, okay? And so while all of the alternatives to incarceration are some form of prevention, even if we're preventing re-entry into the justice system, deflection is the furthest upstream. So the first component then is to really embrace that full continuum of the justice system. Next, we need to realize that the justice system alone is not going to be addressing this issue. And so we're looking at the interplay between justice. So the justice system, whether it's pre-arrest deflection or some kind of a diversion program, is going to determine who's a good fit for this intervention. Do we need supervision? What is this supervision going to look like? Do we have accountability, not only for the individual in the justice system, but also the programs that are assisting that individual? Because if they are not actively doing what they need to do, we may not see the impact that's desired. Of course, treatment plays a key role. Lawyers should not be diagnosing substance use disorders or mental health or any other issues. So we are counting on our treatment partners to do the diagnostic clinical assessments to determine the level of care that is needed. Again, that's not something that a lawyer should be doing. And also offering appropriate behavioral health, so the substance use disorder and mental health services, as well as any appropriate medical and pharmacological treatment. And then we also rely heavily upon the community. So what services are needed from the community to help achieve and sustain recovery? Are there pro-social habitation activities or thinking strategies? Are there adaptive habilitation strategies or life skills that are needed? And really, we need the full cooperation of all three systems to make this work. Now, when someone comes to the legal system, and I know when I was on the bench, I started my day with boxes of complaints, behaviors that people did, and that's about all I knew about someone coming in, what day it was, what it was alleged that you did, and what the maximum fines and penalties were. Oftentimes there was a record, so I would also know if there were any past recorded evidences of behaviors that are against laws. But what we know to do this approach effectively, that we actually have to ask a few more questions. And so you'll see here a grid that looks at the need for treatment. Again, the clinicians would be helping you assess this. And also, what is the risk for recidivism? If someone is not likely to come back into the courts, we don't want to take activities that will actually make it more likely that they will come see us versus if we would have left them alone. And you can see in each of these quadrants, they call for a different approach. So high risk for recidivism, high need for treatment. It's really not going to be a candidate for deflection. That's going to have a robust court-supervised response that engages with supervision, treatment, thinking skills, and life skills. If someone is low risk for recidivism and low need for treatment, that's a much lighter touch. That might be a great candidate for deflection or even prosecutorial diversion. Low risk for recidivism doesn't mean that the court can't be involved, but really the goal is to quickly engage someone in services. And if there's not a significant treatment need, then really we have more of those traditional court goals rather than the treatment services that we're looking at. We also want to be reasonable about what we expect. So in the 1 to 12 months, it's when a court may be most likely to handle the case. Oftentimes, I saw colleagues on the bench wanted everything taken care of. We wanted the model citizen. Here, if someone is coming in with some pretty significant needs, we can expect that they might have some more abstinent friends, less illegal activity, maybe some growing stabilization of the home situation. It's not really until years 1 to 3, again, if someone comes in with some significant challenges, that we're seeing that virtual elimination of the behaviors that may have brought someone into a court system. We also don't want to let go of having community support available. It actually takes about 4 to 7 years for someone to be able to sustain that recovery primarily independently. So it doesn't mean the court needs to be involved at years 4 through 7, but we want to make sure that we don't remove those community services that are needed too early. And then specialized case management, I know my colleague Elisa will be talking to you very shortly, so just to make a quick mention, that helps individuals, so it's focused on the individual now. It helps them succeed both within each of the systems and between the systems, and really helps to break down the barriers that an individual may have to achieve success. Just a few additional comments before I pass this along to Elisa. I want to make sure that it's clear that UNODC and World Health Organization are both in agreement that substance use disorders are health problems that need to be treated in the healthcare system. it's particularly noteworthy to see that the behavior that brought someone into court, particularly when it's a low-level crime, essentially stops when they have effective treatment and support services. And so this close collaboration has been embraced internationally. It also helps us achieve the goal of proportionality. So we really need to balance the seriousness of the offense with the severity of punishment. So having an extremely punitive approach for possession or use of substances is not in proportion to what is needed. So we know it's not effective and it does not achieve this goal of proportionality. It's also when we look at non-compliance. So the recovery process does take a while. There can be some mistakes along the way. We really want to make sure that we don't have overly harsh responses to that are punitive, and instead we continue to work toward that goal of effectively reducing and even eliminating the behavior. Here, as I mentioned before, prevention strategies tend to work well with the low-risk, low-need individuals, community supervision focused models, individuals that are high risk for recidivism and low need for treatment. So community supervision is what courts typically focus on. Community treatment is effective for those low risk, high need, and that can include a deflection program. Having some kind of a residential or highly intensive program like a drug court is best suited for high risk, high need. And where there are public safety concerns, then that is where we're looking at potential for prison or programs. So here is the end. I'm inviting conversations at a later date. Always feel free to get a hold of me in the future. And I will stop sharing so Elisa can take the microphone.
Thank you so much, Michele. I think, Melody, you were muted, so I was wondering whether you want to transition. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me. Just bear with me 1 second when I started sharing my screen so we can begin right now in my presentation. And here is with the nice presentation mode. So my task today is just to bring your attention to the individuals that we are serving. I really like to call it, as Igor mentioned before me, justice-involved individuals or clients, because the accent is all about them, or should be all about them. And as I hear many of the attendees today in the audience, they are focused on prevention, so they will really understand how important it is to put the individual at the core center of all the things that we do. In terms of my presentation, I want to highlight and discuss with you some of the challenges that are faced by these justice-involved individuals and how case care management can help their social integration, what are the benefits of it, and drawing some conclusion. So let's have a look at the profile of the people that we are talking about. These are individuals that are facing legal challenges and often conviction, because they might be at any point of the submap that we have been seeing today. So they might be just about to be arrested, or they could be in their re-entry phase. So there is a range of places where they can be within the same justice, criminal justice system continuum, and it varies a lot also according to the countries that we're speaking about. They often experience some health issues that are related to the substance use disorder, but they could also be co-occurring. So they might have different and not totally diagnosed health issues that require attention. They are often also in some condition of poverty or lack of opportunities, so they are definitely in need of some sort of assistance, and in the most of the cases they don't know how to get it. They might have interrupted education, unfinished studies, or limited education that leads also often for them to be unemployed, and they are highly stigmatized, and in most of the cases they feel alone and confused. So this is a screenshot of how they might look like. And when we are talking about case care management, I just want to highlight the two words. It's a form, as Michele mentioned before, of specialized care management. Some of you might be familiar with the word case, and some other more with the word care. So here we want to put these two together because it's a language that is, the case is mostly understood by the lawyers, by the judges, and the care is more familiar with treatment and social services. But having these two, it really combines the kind of holistic approach that you want to infuse in this specialized case care management. So just a little bit of an overview, it's an initiative of CCAD because we were the developer of the curriculum on case care management. But what this curriculum really wants to do is increase the coordination between and across all the different systems of the criminal justice system, the health system, and the social service system, so that there can be a coordination for the justice-involved individuals that can be assessed and accompanied throughout all their program. So that will lead to a coordination of the strengths and needs of the individual that will lead also to better option and more sustainable option for the social integration. And here I would like to challenge the idea that social integration comes at the end of the continuum of care. Actually, social integration comes at the beginning because these people are never really fully integrated. So sometimes we use different language of integration, reintegration, but in most of the cases, this population have been at the fringes since the very beginning. So achieving the integration is the important goal, but it's not just about the future, it's about the present, because their integration starts along when they are taken care in the model of case care management, and they receive the attention and the consideration that they deserve since the very beginning, and they are helped throughout the time in establishing a plan, as we will see. In the presentation, I have all the steps that the case care management will do to really help understanding what is needed and the kind of intervention. Because we are not speaking just about treatment. As we mentioned before, treatment is the key component to support people with substance use disorder, but there are different and complex needs that needs to be taken into consideration. Because if not, these elements that we are not considering, we are not addressing, they will have a strong influence then in the social integration part when they comes to that. Because we see social integration and recovery as a two-part. When Michele was presenting the reasonable expectation over time the individual will increase their autonomy, getting into recovery and seeing some of the results. But the consolidation of these results will happen over time, and the attention that they need will also develop and changes over time. So when we are speaking about the different action that the case care manager is implementing, we are starting with screening and assessment, so that the individuals goes through first a screening to understand which kind of problem you might have and the severity of problem, and then a throughout assessment that will evaluate all the needs but also the strength. And the professional who are running this assessment, they are gonna provide clear indication of the different areas that need to be taken into consideration while planning. Let me speak about this planning. It's not something that the case care manager is doing alone. The individual is engaged, is part of the planning, because at the beginning it will have an understanding of how things develop, but over time the individual will be empowered and will become a more and more actor in his recovery and social integration. And then there is a key passage of referral, while the case care manager will be able to address all the needs and help the individual prioritize what comes first, because as we said before, there are different needs. They might need treatment, they might need to get a complete their level of education, get some professional experience, so that all these components will be part of the plan, which is not just a treatment plan, but is a treatment and service plan. And in all these activities, there is a constant monitoring and evaluation to assess and reassess the progress, the difficulties, if this treatment plan and service plan needs to be readjusted, and will probably need to be readjusted over time. Because life is not static, there are many things that happen, and setbacks also in treatment might happen. And this is not a proof that the treatment is not working or that the alternative incarceration is not working. Is a proof that something needs to be adjusted and should be adjusted so that the individual can continue progressing in his recovery. And there is also a component of advocacy. Many times individuals are not familiar with the criminal justice system. They're not familiar with the expectation. They don't know how to be able to raise their voice and present their difficulties. So the case care manager is there to assist them and to support them within the criminal justice system, within the other services that he's assessing, so that to make sure that you always get the attention that is needed. And there is also all good things go to an end. There is a completion, because all the program will eventually arrive to the end, but thanks to the case care manager, there are linkages with the community based support, so that the individual is not alone. So that that was mentioned before as the aftercare or the continuum care is a warm referral to other opportunities, support groups that are there and that can actually support the individual in the medium long terms, also upon release of the program. So the case care manager is providing a single point of contact, so the individual at any time knows who to call, where to go, and has this serenity of mind, especially at the beginning when they are a bit confused, they don't know, they have conflicting priorities. It helps walking through the different opportunities and find the right path or the right dose of intervention, and is a person that is always there and is a trusted professional for the clients, but also for the other actors that are involved in this complex multi-system. I want to mention and acknowledge that this case care management model that we developed is based and inspired and infused by the experience of many international organizations that have been collaborating with us in doing that, and also civil society, and among them especially Task for Treatment Alternative for Safe Community, that has strongly infused the case care management model, and also the collaboration with CAMH, the Center for Additional Mental Health in Canada. And we are very proud to have launched also a pilot project in Trinidad and Tobago that is using the case care management model adapted to their culture. So let's have a little bit of review. What are the benefits of using this model? And I want to mention that this model could be applied at all the interventions that we have seen in the submine map. Right now, it seems to be focused more in the middle area, so during the sentence or after the sentence for reentry. But this model of personalized care and going through all the steps that I mentioned before could be implemented at any point of the submate system. And it's really up to each country to decide where they want to start. But the methodology is equally valid in each of these points, because there is an increased collaboration with all the stakeholders, because this single point of contact allows this coordination. And there is an increased access to the evidence-based services that the participant needs because of the screening and assessment. So there is a clear overview of the needs, but I want to emphasize also the strengths, because the individuals are not 100% deficit. They have also positive angles. They come with their own experience, and there are some skills that are transferable. So knowing the client, knowing their potential is one of the key to be really supported in their successful recovery. And also, the participants are gradually empowered. At the beginning, they are very confused, they feel alone, but gradually, thanks to the attention they receive, they start seeing their own potential and they start getting more and more engaged in their recovery and reintegration path. And ultimately, we really want to reduce what we call the revolving door. We don't want people to come back to the justice system. We want them to be fully integrated as active member in their society. So this is the ultimate goal. So these are my few conclusions that as we started, we were, and there are key many challenges and there are many needs for individuals with SDU in the justice system. But social integration does not come at the end. It's multifaceted and should be addressed from the beginning so that the individual is part of the solution, it's part of the plan, and this plan will grow with the individual itself. And it's really important to have the engagement of all the actors so that they are all on the same page and they can really be supportive of the individual. And thanks to the process and the step that we've seen, the case manager is strengthening the capacity to identify, address, and respond to the participant needs, and also building upon the strength. And it's really the case manager, a trusted professional that is able to work with all the representatives from the different systems, the justice, the health, and the social services, so that it creates this bridge and also engage very much with the community and find the long-term support that the individual needs. And working with the community and especially you that are all members of the ISAP, you know how important it is to have and to strengthen, to know what is available in the community and creating all these linkages, all these bridges so that the individuals know where to go, which door to knock, and will find this supportive attitude into the community. Because ultimately, fighting against the stigma that these individuals are facing, the response is also in the community. The more the community know about substance use disorder, the more they can be supportive of families and communities that are welcoming, that are providing not just second, but maybe third and fourth chances to individuals who are in their recovery, because that is what they need to be successful in the medium long run. They want to be integrated and they want to be part of this community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elisa. And thank you for all my colleagues for, you can see why I'm so excited that they're all partners in our desire to expand alternatives to incarceration globally. Our time is up, and I know we don't have any time for questions. I'm going to recommend that if you do have questions and would like to be able to engage in a discussion, that perhaps you check in with Paulo Martelli or your Brazil chapter person, write down that, and I will work out with ISIP globally a way to communicate individually with back to you. So if you have questions, we hopefully will be able to answer some of the primary questions. Again, I wish you the very best. I wish you a successful conference, and I thank you for your attention in this matter. Be safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
Obrigado, Melody.
So let's move on. We are on schedule. Now we are going to have a panel with the people from Senapred. Senapred panel will talk about something that is extremely important and something that we have been focusing on